Although the new album from the Manic Street Preachers, Critical Thinking, doesn't rock as hard as some of the albums of the band's past, it's a finely produced and well-crafted album that's worthy of the band's already huge catalog. So is the new Manic Street Preachers album, Critical Thinking, worth a listen? Let's find out on this edition of Rock Album Review. Hey everybody, it's Nick here with you. Welcome back to the channel. Critical Thinking is the 15th studio album from the Manic Street Preachers. It's the follow-up to 2021's The Ultra Vivid Lament. And I'm a huge Manic Street Preachers fan. They're one of my favorite UK bands of all time. In fact, I did a rock albums ranked for the band a few years ago, and I'll link that up for you here. And although I don't really reach for the Manic Street Preachers to listen to as much as I used to, I still love the band and I always look forward to whenever they put out a new record. So how does this new album from the Manic Street Preachers, Critical Thinking, stack up? Overall, I think this new record from the Manic Street Preachers, Critical Thinking, is a good, if not great, Manic Street Preachers album. I think it's stronger overall than their last record, The Ultra Vivid Lament, and includes some truly great Manic Street Preachers songs. That said, I do kind of miss the rockier edge of Manic Street Preachers, which started to drop off around 2014's Futurology and the albums that came out after that. And I think the last real big rock record that we got from the Manic Street Preachers was Postcards from a Young Man in 2010. And even though the Manic Street Preachers have rocked a lot in their past, the band has always explored different styles. It's not unusual for them to go soft, to go hard, and everywhere in between. They've always had a little bit more of a softer, more melodic side, which is very evident on this album. The band, of course, still writes great songs, but they have entered into a more chill era of the Manic Street Preachers of their career, more wispy and breezy, less nihilistic and violent, and middle age may have finally set in for the Manic Street Preachers. That's not to say that the Manic Street Preachers have lost their anger or their political edge. The opening and title track, Critical Thinking, features lyricist and bassist Nicky Wire on lead vocals. I think the first Manic Street Preachers album that features him on the lead vocals on the first track. I could be wrong. You can let me know in the comments. But this song feels like modern Manic Street Preachers mixed with the darkness of the Holy Bible. Nicky Wire is as angry as ever on this Manic's version of kind of like Radiohead's Fitter Happier, talking about the pinnacle of despair, the apex of denial, the skyscrapers of untruth. So the band still have some fires in their bellies. And Nicky Wire has more of a vocal presence on this album in general, probably the most since Know Your Enemy came out in 2001. The band has kind of switched around their roles on this record. Nicky Wire, who's the usual lyricist, sings more lead on this album than any other Manic's album in the past, and James Dean Bradfield, the lead singer and guitar player of Manic Street Preachers, writes more of his own lyrics on this record than he has in the past. Nicky also sings lead vocals on songs like One Man Militia and Hiding in Plain Sight, which is the first Manic Street Preachers single, as far as I know, mainline Manic Street Preachers single to feature Nicky Wire on lead vocals. He's sung many songs for the band in the past, but this really is that first headline spot for him after all these years. And Nicky Wire doesn't have the best voice, but it's distinct, you know? I know it doesn't compare to James Dean Bradfield, who's one of the best vocalists in all of rock history, but as the primary lyric writer for the Manic Street Preachers, it's kind of cool to hear him sing his own lyrics. And even with all those changes and the band switching things around and doing new things, I think there are a handful of strong tracks on here that I think are really worth the history of the Manic's canon. The first single, Decline and Fall, is already a classic Manic single. It follows other singles they've released in the recent years with big piano riff, a big guitar riff in tandem. It sounds very majestic, has a nice upbeat sound to it. Even if the lyrics are heavy, the music feels light, and I love James Dean Bradfield's voice. He can hit those crazy notes and put the right amount of grit on certain lines, and I think this one really reminds me of more recent singles like International Blue or Orwellian. I also really liked People Ruin Paintings. I really like the verse melody on this track. It has a nice guitar tone and guitar line from James Dean Bradfield. A lot of great stuff happening for him guitar-wise on here. And I think I like this song because, you know what? The Manic Street Preachers are right. People ruin everything. It has a really, really nice country and western style solo from James Dean Bradfield, something that does really well on a lot of different Manics tracks. Has a really cool vibe to it. Same with the song like Out of Time Revival, which has a really cool New Order / Police 80s retro vibe to it. And I want to give a shout out to Sean Moore, the drummer of the Manic Street Preachers. He doesn't really do anything crazy on the drums. He's not this really flashy drummer, but he's always really solid. Everything he does on these tracks is propulsive, it's solid, and he really is the backbone of the Manic Street Preachers. Unfortunately, there are some weak points in the early part of this album that I thought weren't as strong as some of the other songs on here. Brushstrokes of Reunion has a really neat 80s kind of sheen to it, but it doesn't have the catchiest of melodies, and it doesn't really feel like this song, like the lyrics match with the melody. And I was wondering kind of what the difference was between this song and some of the other songs on the album, and that was because the lyrics for this song were written by James Dean Bradfield. Obviously, we know Nicky Wire and previously Richie Edwards were the main lyricists for the Manic Street Preachers. It's not really a knock on James Dean Bradfield, but I maybe think that's why this song doesn't work as well for me, because it doesn't have that interplay between Nicky Wire's lyrics and James Dean Bradfield's music. And not to say that he's a bad lyricist, but I feel like maybe it's a little bit out of step with the usual way that the band does things. And I felt a little bit bored towards the end of listening to Critical Thinking. Songs like Deleted Scenes, Late Day Peaks, and One Man Militia all kind of blended together for me. I felt like overall there wasn't enough variety in the songs on this album, and it was kind of missing that Manic's edge that I really love in some of their past material. But there are some other really strong songs on here as well. There are some more personal lyrics to go along with the political themes throughout this record. Dear Stephen, I read, is about a postcard that Nicky Wire received back in the 80s from his musical hero, Morrissey at the time, which I thought was really cool. Being Baptized is about James Dean Bradfield's experience working on a BBC project with Alan Toussaint, who is a great soul artist and arranger for many, many years. And then My Brave Friend is a really beautiful tune about the loss of a friend. Manic Street Preachers never really skimp out on the beauty, and there's a lot of that on Critical Thinking. And in a recent interview, the band actually made a comparison of this record to Lifeblood from 2004, and I kind of agree. This album has a certain sheen and a certain polish to it that reminds me of Lifeblood, and that's a Manic's album that I really love, and it's kind of cool to see the two as companion albums. But I do have to give a special shout out to James Dean Bradfield, who again on this record paints a beautiful tapestry of guitars. I watched his recent segment on that pedal show on YouTube, and that was just awesome to see. He's just a great guitarist, and he really provides so much class and beauty to the proceedings on this album. And this is a really breezy listen as well. The Manics have never been known to be one of those bands that does extended jams or long interludes or anything like that. Most of the songs on this record clock in at under 5 minutes, and each song is tight and memorable, and there really is no fat on this musical bone. Do I wish that the Manics still rocked a bit harder and there was a little bit more edge on this album? Yes, but that's just me. They're still fully capable of writing great songs, some really beautiful tracks on album number 15. It's hard to believe that they've been around that long. 15 Manic Street Preachers albums, in addition to all the bonus tracks and B-sides they put out over the years. And I fully intend to buy the deluxe edition of Critical Thinking on CD and add it to my Manics collection. Favorite tracks for me on Critical Thinking were the title track, as well as Decline and Fall, People Ruin Paintings, and Out of Time Revival. It's not my favorite Manic Street Preachers album, but I think it's a solid effort from the band. I think it's stronger than their last album, The Ultra Vivid Lament. Not every track is great, but there are some new Manic Street Preachers classics to add to their canon, so I'm going to give Critical Thinking, the new album from Manic Street Preachers, a 3 out of 5. And that is it, guys. That is my rock album review for the new album from Manic Street Preachers, Critical Thinking. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are of the new album. If you like this video, make sure to toss me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate that. Make sure to smash the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future videos, and make sure to follow me on social media at Nick Chino Music. But I'll see you guys again for another rock album review here on the channel. Until then, rock on, everybody.